John Denver. Just saying the name brings up images of sunshine, golden hair, and those pristine snow-capped mountains he loved so much. He was the smiling troubadour of the 1970s, a man whose voice felt like a warm hug to millions of people. His songs were all about the simple beauties of life, the joy of nature, the comfort of home, the purity of love. Take me home, country roads, Rocky Mountain high, sunshine on my shoulders. These weren't just pop songs. They were the soundtrack for a generation's ideals. He built this image of gentle, homespun wholesomeness, and he was a master at it. But what if that was only half the story? What if the man who sang of peace and harmony actually left behind a world of chaos for the people he loved most? John Denver's music was a comforting embrace, but the wholesome image he so carefully built in life hid a startling reality that would only surface after his tragic death. This is the story of how a man who sang of love left behind a fortune so vast and a legal mess so complex it brought his family to tears. It's a story of a staggering $60 million estate that would eventually grow into a $200 million empire, and the 6-year legal battle that tested his loved ones as they navigated the grief, the greed, and the chaos he left behind. To really get the shocking aftermath of John Denver's life, you first have to understand the legend he created. Born Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., he was the son of a strict Air Force pilot. Growing up, he had a lonely childhood, moving from state to state. Music was his escape. He grabbed a guitar, found his voice, and in the wild 1960s, he headed to Los Angeles to chase his dream. He changed his last name to Denver, as a nod to the capital of his favorite state, Colorado, the place that would become his whole identity. After a run with the Mitchell Trio, Denver went solo and completely redefined folk and pop music. His rise was meteoric. With his acoustic guitar, Dutch boy haircut, and those famous granny glasses, he was the polar opposite of the era's rock and roll rebellion. He wasn't dangerous. He was safe. His songs were simple, heartfelt tributes to the natural world. Rocky Mountain High wasn't just a song. It was an anthem for a state and a way of life. He sold over 33 million records and earned 12 gold and 4 platinum albums with songs that became a part of America's cultural fabric. His personal life seemed to be just as perfect. In 1967, he married Annie Martell, and their love story was immortalized in one of the world's most beloved ballads, Annie's Song. The story goes he wrote the whole thing in 10 minutes on a ski lift in Aspen, totally overcome by the view and his love for his wife. The world saw a perfect couple. They adopted 2 children, Zachary John and Anna Kate, and settled down in a beautiful home in Aspen. Denver once said, "I'll tell you the best thing about me. I'm some guy's dad. I'm some little gal's dad. When I die, Zachary John and Anna Kate's father, boy, that's enough for me to be remembered by." This persona wasn't just for show. Denver was a passionate activist and humanitarian who fought to end world hunger. He was a loud and proud environmentalist long before it was trendy. He co-founded the WinStar Foundation in 1976, buying up nearly 1,000 acres in Snowmass, Colorado, with a grand vision to preserve it as a wildlife sanctuary. He served on boards for the National Space Institute and the Cousteau Society. Publicly, he was a man living his values. But behind the peaceful facade, things were starting to crumble. His first marriage, the one that gave us Annie's Song, ended in a painful divorce in 1982. Denver admitted his career tore them apart. The divorce was bitter. In a fit of rage that was a world away from his public image, he reportedly took a chainsaw to their marital bed. He remarried in 1988 to Australian actress Cassandra Delaney, and they had a daughter, Jessie Bell. But that marriage was also rocky and ended in another messy divorce in 1993. Denver later said she managed to make a fool of me from one end of the valley to the other. These personal struggles, along with a couple of DUIs, hinted at a much more complicated man than the public ever saw. Still, his music and his image as the gentle, nature-loving troubadour held strong. That is, until a clear autumn afternoon. In 1997, when that voice was silenced forever and the world he'd built came crashing down. October 12, 1997, was a beautiful, clear day over Monterey Bay, California. John Denver, an experienced pilot, decided to take his experimental aircraft for a spin. For a man who sang about soaring with eagles, the sky was his happy place. But this flight would be his last. Around 5:28 p.m., his plane plunged into the Pacific Ocean. He was just 53 years old. The news of his death sent a wave of grief across the globe. It was a sudden, tragic end for an artist who had brought so much comfort to so many. But as the world mourned the icon, his family, his 3 children, his mother, and his ex-wives were about to start a private nightmare. In the days after the crash, as they tried to process their grief, they were hit with a catastrophic revelation. John Denver, a man worth an estimated $60 million, had died without a valid will. In legal terms, he was intestate. For an ordinary person, that's a headache. For a celebrity with a massive fortune, complex business assets, and a blended family, it was a recipe for disaster. The man who meticulously planned benefit concerts and environmental foundations had failed to do the one thing that could have protected his family: write down his final wishes. He had no say in who would manage his estate, how his assets would be split, or who would be a guardian for his youngest daughter. Every single decision was now in the hands of the California probate court. The problem was huge. The $60 million was just the beginning. The estate was a complex web of assets. The biggest prize was his music catalog, nearly 300 songs, including timeless classics still making millions in royalties. How do you even put a price on the future of a song like "Take Me Home, Country Roads"? Then there was the real estate, including his beloved 7,135-square-foot Aspen mansion he built in 1972. And of course, the nearly 1,000-acre Windstar property he meant to be his environmental legacy. On top of that were investments, his own record label, and a management company, all of it now tangled in the impersonal process of probate. Because he died in California and wasn't married, the law said his assets would be divided among his children. A judge appointed his first ex-wife, Annie Martell, as the estate's administrator, putting her right in the middle of a legal and financial storm. The family was reeling from his death, and now they were facing a mountain of legal paperwork and the daunting task of untangling a $60 million mess. The peace and love Denver sang about were gone, replaced by lawyers and court dates. The stage was set for a 6-year struggle that would test the very family he loved. For John Denver's family, the 6 years after his death weren't for quiet grieving. They were for a grueling legal battle fought in sterile courtrooms and lawyers' offices. The lack of a will opened a Pandora's box of problems, and settling his $60 million estate became a long, painful ordeal. The first major fight was over the value of the estate itself. How do you predict the future earnings of a timeless music legend? This wasn't just appraising a house, it was forecasting royalties for songs still being played on the radio and licensed for movies. The estate's administrators, led by Annie Martell, had to come up with a number. But they weren't the only ones with an opinion. The IRS was watching. The IRS claimed the estate was undervalued by a massive $2.5 million, mainly questioning the valuation of Denver's record label and management company. Based on this, they demanded about $1.5 million in back taxes. For a family already heartbroken, this was a devastating blow. It meant more lawyers, more stress, and the threat of a massive tax bill. The fight with the IRS dragged on for years. But in a shocking twist, after years of legal wrangling, the U.S. tax court didn't just side with the family. It found the IRS had been wrong. In November 2003, the court ruled that not only did the estate not owe $1.5 million, it was actually due a tax refund of nearly $600,000. It was a huge victory, but one that came at a tremendous cost in time and stress. While the IRS battle raged, a more personal struggle was playing out. Under California law, Denver's property had to be split among his 3 children, Zachary, Anna Kate, and Jessie Bell. Since Jessie Bell was only 8, her share was put into a trust, adding another layer of legal complexity. This wasn't just about splitting cash. It was about dividing a living, breathing financial empire. While there's little evidence of a public feud between the children, you can only imagine the emotional toll that 6 years of financial limbo can take on a grieving family. Every delay was a new source of frustration. His second ex-wife, Cassandra Delaney, also made a claim for a share of the estate. Perhaps the saddest part of this story was the fate of his beloved Windstar property. It was supposed to be his lasting gift to the world, a center for environmentalism. But without a will, Windstar was just another asset in the estate, and assets often have to be sold to pay debts and taxes. The Windstar Foundation struggled to survive without him, and eventually, the heartbreaking decision was made to sell the land. Although a conservation easement protected most of the land from development, the sale was seen by many as the end of Denver's grand vision. The same was true for his other favorite charities. Without a will, organizations like the Cousteau Society didn't receive any dire